this stage here tonight, right? I end of last year, actually a little bit earlier, like October time, like I found a videotape in my attic. Now on the surface, this videotape isn't particularly interesting. It's a Panasonic tape. It's set to long play. It had a label, but it's been ripped off. But actually, well, it turns out that this videotape is kind of closely connected to my own kind of like personal history, and I didn't quite realize just how connected it was until I rewound the tape back right to the very, very start and saw what was on there, and this is what it was. It's Ghostbusters. All right. Right. Every aspect of my life, like every part of my personality, at some point in time, like it all comes back to this encounter. Now, I first saw Ghostbusters with my granddad when I was visiting him up in Edinburgh. Now, like I thought I saw this film when I was about like 7 or like 8 years old, but like Wikipedia tells me, right, that the Ghostbusters actually was out in the cinema in 1984, all right, which means that I was actually 4 years old when my granddad took me to see it. Like, when you were 4, like Ghostbusters is not a comedy, right? Like, because you don't understand any of like the kind of like the wry dialogue or kind of like the humorous kind of like playfulness with kind of existing film genres, because you're 4, right? So it's just you sitting in a pitch black room on your own without a single clue what's going on, because you're a tiny child waiting for ghosts to come screaming at your face for about 90 minutes. That summer in 1984, I ended up staying with my grandparents for about a week, and possibly because my granddad just didn't know what else to do with me, we ended up going back to the cinema every single day. Every day for 5 days, back to the pitch black room full of ghosts. But, right, what I'd like to say is that I've kind of learned from this experience, right? And every single time I went back to watch the film, time after time, I got closer to the film. I began to understand it better and better, and to the point by the time I got to see it on the 5th time, I could scrutinize every single scene. I could break it down into its composite parts. I could work out what was so scary about it in the first place. Next summer, I went to visit my granddad. He bought a VCR player, and the first film which I wanted to record off a television was Ghostbusters, and that's this tape right here. Now, it turns out that my granddad kept using it for like many, many years after I kind of grew up, and actually what's kind of left on this tape now is pretty much this kind of strange patchwork quilt of all my granddad's viewing habits over the last sort of like 10 years of his life. Well, after he died, the tape ended up kind of passing to me, and I'm not entirely sure how that happened. But see, the thing is that my granddad's process of kind of dealing with kind of fear, which was, you know, just keep watching again and again and again, like keep watching until you're no longer afraid of it. Like that process, like I think I ended up kind of silently kind of like absorbing off my granddad. And actually, if it's not too crass to say this, I think it actually ended up helping me deal with his death. Because, you know, for something that TV can teach us time after time, you know, it's just that, you know, it shows us death and how to mourn. And I feel that by the time my granddad actually died, you know, I've been in dress rehearsal my entire life. You know, I even knew exactly what it would look like as well. You know, I imagined sort of someone turning to me in slow motion and saying, oh, you better take a seat. And suddenly my head would be spinning as I'd be waiting for that name, and then it would be out there, and for a second I'd be blind and it would hurt, and I'd try to make a word, but I couldn't. Even his body language was completely unconvincing. But see, I'm not trying to play a game with you here, right? I just want you to recognize the fact that I've practiced like these routines, this grief, like they're things that I've memorized. And I'm not trying to score points either. Like, it's not the pain, but the posturing. That's the first thing that runs through my head when I hear that my granddad has died, and you know, instead of the wisdom imparted by my family. I feel sick, but sickness, if you follow me, is something that Hollywood has taught me. It transports me for a fee to a place off screen where a fresh script is waiting. But the truth is, like, we can't take photos of death. Death has no shape, just a smell. And to look upon the kingdom is to look upon a fiction. So when I heard that he's died, it was like, Someone turning to me in slow motion. You better take a seat. And suddenly my head's spinning as I'm waiting for that name, and then it's out there. And for a second I'd be blind. It hurts. I try to make a word, but I can't. Even my body language is completely unconvincing. And I'm not trying to play a game with you here. I just want you to recognize the fact that I've practiced this routines, this grief, the things that I've memorized. I'm not trying to score points. It's not the pain, but the posturing. That's the first thing that runs around my head when I hear that my granddad has died instead of the wisdom imparted by my family. I feel sick, but sickness, if you follow me, is something that Hollywood has taught me. It transports me for a fee to a place off screen where a fresh script is waiting. But the truth is, we can't take photos of death. Death has no shape, just a smell. And to look upon the kingdom is to look upon a fiction. I can't say heaven without sounding like a tool. A gold key turning in a lock, blood rushing into the head. Sleep tight, sweet prince. Now you belong to the library. Ever since the pharaohs, the dead get a guidebook. And we've sprayed those words onto high walls, effed our way into custody, begged the city for another day, always trying to cleanse with a fantasy. Born and raised as a dribbler, it's just how we marked our territory. Caught between the story of the hero and the victim. Both of songs that can put you on your feet, both lead eventually to a broken neck. But the song carries on, just in a different key. Don't worry, he's gone to a better place, really. Why greet the boatman with open palm and tokens, fervent with directions to someone else's heaven? Why greet my granddad at the gates of a world that isn't mine? Because you see, if I'm going to see him later, then I have to build a place to put him in that I can define. So if you're willing, take a minute and sit right there on a chair he used to rock me to sleep in. A chair when my dreams were replaced by the television, always same time, same channel, me waking to find I knew the script backwards, him recast as every single character. Please recreate every letter that you wrote me, recreate the reasons that you wrote them too. I want to picture you before the world hardened, when you could move like I did. Not like this, obviously. I can't move like this, but one dance on your slippers for all the times I missed it. And I'll fight off every angel. I'll pull the plug on heaven. Let it gurgle down the drain. I'll hide you in stories that my grandma told when I was sick. Who cares about the truth? Her license was to entertain. And so, for a second, forgetting my age, if I could find a single point in time that I could loop you in until I die, then I would choose 4 years old, outside the Odeon on South Clark Street, both of us about to see a ghost for the first time. There is no better place. This is the place. Right, so it turns out my granddad was a massive fan of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, how awesome is that? Now, I don't know how familiar you all are with the narrative arc of the show. It features an actor called Will Smith playing a character called Will Smith who grows up in the Philadelphia projects. See, after one day, there is a chance encounter with a local street gang, during which Will decides to spin around the gang member's head, an act that greatly disappoints his mother, who decides it's best that Will leave West Philadelphia and relocate to a residential community in the west side of the hills of Los Angeles to live with his relatives. Now, suddenly, Will is transported into a palatial paradise where even the slightest whim can be actualized. It is almost as if he has died and gone to heaven. And who are we to say that the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air isn't exactly that? A kind of hip-hop Twilight Zone? What if Will was killed on that basketball court? A teenage rebellion, rudely interrupted mid-tag. A young boy denied his legacy. You know, I think that's a plausible enough interpretation. What if Will was killed on this basketball court? His body held in its golden ratios, and yet somehow his spirit played on, searching for something beyond the hoop. But here's where the story gets dark, because Will's struggle with the system is far from over. For it turns out that God is not his God, and Will must suffer the trauma of heaven, a hegemonic state incapable of granting Will the paradise he desires. Trapped in a sterile vision of happiness traced straight out of the Renaissance, what can Will do but gird his senses and begin to rebuild a new Philadelphia, right here inside the very mind of God. And when I sit there night after night watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right, I begin to feel connected to my granddad in ways that I'd forgotten possible. Like, I know it sounds stupid, right, but if you try and write about death, 9 out of 10 times you'll just end up staring at a brick wall. But then maybe I thought, if you wrote about that brick wall, you might just say something about the meaning of death. So I developed a game, a technique which I could play around with. I'd let the Fresh Prince tell me what to say. He could do all the hard work for me. And if it fucks up, what's the work gonna happen? I mean, I'd screw up my lines. But at the very best, I might get to hear some sort of voice in the whirlwind, some hidden message coded into the background. And it'd be simple, you see. All I'd have to do is follow the prince as he left his earthly world behind. And with this direction, I could follow my granddad beyond the grave into the light. Now, my granddad is 1/4 Buddhist. I'm an atheist at best. So when it comes to death, I'll find solace anywhere. I'll even sit on the throne as the prince. I can't say that. 4 years old in the front row seat. The titles slide like a whiteboard squeak. Lesson 1, lights off, don't speak, don't scream. The ghost can't leave the screen. It's scary, right? But it's all done with light. Cross the beams, repeat the scene. Trace where the ghosts have been. Learn the routine. Point the F, pretend to clean. See, it's not what it seems. Now you're part of a team. Born forever to repeat these moves. Caught in a loop. Trapped in a game that we're destined to lose. But maybe this time, ooh, the locals are spooked, which brings me a lesson too. See the clock turn back so we never get old. And just like I ain't afraid of no ghost, we'll never get old. Right on time, we'll always stay fresh, you and I. Grandfather and grandson. Death is a door, a revolving one. And if you push hard enough, we'll meet somewhere on the other side of the screen. And perhaps it's a curse to save your goodbyes. Then again, maybe that's the price of stepping in the same river twice. Cheers, thanks.